Well, last week, lawyers for the state of Florida told the federal appeals court panel that the state could prevent college professors at public universities from criticizing the governor during classroom instruction. The argument came as the state defended Florida's Intellectual Freedom Act, also known as the Stop Woke Act, which was passed 2 years ago. The law forbids educators from promoting concepts that make anyone feel guilt, anguish, or other psychological distress related to race, color, national origin, or sex because of actions committed in the past. Several university professors have challenged the law, saying it limits academic freedom. The state's lawyers argued that because professors are government employees, the government can restrict professors on a content-wide basis, and they can restrict them from offering viewpoints that are contrary. If they did not wish to comply with Florida's rules, the lawyers argued, the professors could leave for other states friendlier to their viewpoints. Adriana, you're part of this lawsuit. Tell us why you joined this lawsuit, and what did you think of the arguments at that federal appeals panel?
Well, I honestly was shocked. I was shocked the first time, and I'm shocked after what I heard, particularly because at this time, one of the judges seems to be persuaded by Florida arguments. And let me tell you that the question that she asked several times was why Florida cannot impose these laws that protecting the values of the Florida people. And the answer is very simple, and that's very irritating for me that, the media and in general, nobody made the case that these laws are unconstitutional. Florida passed actually an amendment to the Constitution that clearly separates the obligations between the board and the legislature. Okay? The Board of Governors is part of the executive power, not the legislature. There were changes that were careful to separate. There was an agreement in 2010 in which the power of the purse remained with the legislature. Everything else was by the Board of Governors. So I don't know why the Board of Governors had not stopped this and sued the legislature, as they did in the past about fees, for example, and tried to stop this overreach that has to do with the Florida Constitution.
Hey, Adriana, do you feel like when you're teaching in classroom that you represent the government and what you're teaching is officially government sanctioned?
Absolutely not. I represent the field of history, and I need to teach the best practices within my profession. This idea that it was in the courts that we enter the classroom and do whatever we want is a lie. The idea that we have no oversight is a lie. If a student complains, and this has happened several times since I'm in USF, overreach, trying to impose, ideas that are personal on the students, try to humiliate students or do anything related to indoctrination, that person will be suspended. So the idea that we are going to the classroom doing whatever we want is not true. Mm-hmm. Second, this is proven by facts. They have a questionnaire, a survey for students and faculty that try to determine people who complain about this. Nothing. Only 2% of people reply. Students didn't report any problems because we don't have any problem. So the idea that is a cabal of Marxists and all that is preposterous.
All right, let me bring Daryl into this. Daryl, the state does have a right, though, to limit what professors teach. And I'll give you an example. If somebody wanted to be a Holocaust denier in the state of Florida and teach a history class, European history class, I don't imagine that person would last in the state of Florida very long.
Yeah, and there are ways for dealing with that. I mean, every university has a committee that looks into these aberrant cases, so-called, and make a judgment as to whether this is so far beyond the pale that person needs to be removed from the classroom, or at least that course. What the problem is here is that we don't represent the views of the state, nor should we, because oftentimes the views of the state have been proven to be wrong. And all you have to do in the state of Florida is to look at the example of race relations. The state of Florida was a state that mandated segregation, that mandated separate but equal, it mandated privacy in hotels and restaurants and theaters. It was wrong. And the professors shouldn't be upholding something that they view as wrong. They should be pointing this out. That's the whole purpose of a university, is to get the competition of ideas and not simply spouting the ideas of one particular side, including the state of Florida.
When the state attorneys said in this federal court hearing that what you teach in class is government speech, was that the first time you had heard this?
Well, you know, it's a novel notion, but as U.S. District Court Judge Mark Walter said in the case when it was originally heard, this woke law is positively dystopian. Those were his words. Translated, that means it's a stupid law. It's a 1984 kind of law. And it's nothing that we need in the state of Florida. Once again, universities should have a diversity of ideas and not simply engage in one particular viewpoint, especially when that viewpoint, even if it's a state viewpoint, proves to be wrong.
Jason, let me bring you in on this. The woke law, the so-called woke law, is being expanded, right? Tell us about that.
Yeah, there's been like a strategic effort or an intentional effort to expand this as to many places as possible. And so the latest example was trying to impose some of these same restrictions on what teachers can say and what students can hear in teacher preparation programs. That was a law that the governor just signed. And I think one point that folks often don't realize in this is when you really drill down into the nature of what they are trying to stop professors and teachers from talking about, or in some cases learning, or students or even employees from hearing, is really basic stuff. So often the politicians that support this stuff will talk in terms of we're trying to stamp out racist speech, or they'll use like academic terms like critical race theory, not even understanding it themselves. But like when they were pushing this bill this year to stamp this stuff out of, to restrict what teachers can say in teacher preparation courses, there was the sponsor of the bill, a guy by the name of Senator Blaise Ingoli, a Republican from the Tampa Bay area, claimed he had a binder full of examples of egregious materials that he had found in these programs. And when he was actually pushed to read some of those examples, what you found is he was objecting to like materials that taught people how to respond and prevent hate crimes, right? Or that analyzed inequities in education across disability status. These are things people should be learning and talking about. And the last thing you want is politicians deciding what is accurate history or not versus academics and experts.
Tramel, what's your take on this? That what's taught in the classroom, at least according to Governor DeSantis's lawyers, is government speech, or should be government speech?
There's a big disassociation going on about what actually happens in a college classroom. As an adjunct instructor myself, none of this, we're not seeing real concrete examples of what they are pushing forward. Like, we don't see this happening. Also, as a student, there are many adults, especially in Tallahassee, going back to school as adults, professionals, continuing their education. So even these lawyers can go into a classroom right now and see for themselves that what they're claiming is not happening. Professors are usually doing the opposite, being accommodating to students, listening to different viewpoints, making sure very carefully that everyone has a chance to have a point and have discourse. So I think the challenge is, like, stopping all of that healthy conversation that you would expect in a classroom where all sides have the ability to be heard.
Adrienne, are professors afraid now to teach some of what they've taught maybe a few years ago, and are some professors being discouraged and leaving the profession?
Oh, absolutely, and this is a major issue. Happens in the K-12 system. It's happened at universities. I have in my own department 2 tenured people who abandoned academy because of this. So this will pay a price for this, and I already mentioned to the president of my university that, we work hard. I arrived at the same year Dr. Genshaft arrived to USF. We work hard to get to the top of research universities in the AU. AU is all about academic freedom. So we are losing that for sure if this craziness continues. And the issue also is that we have another thing that is going on the radar, which is 266. Now, the Board of Governors and the Board of Trustees need to approve our gen ed courses. Already, faculty in my university receive emails suggesting, for now, to change the title of classes. And the problem was with words like race I'm black, I'm blackness. Okay, so this is happening. And now we don't have tenure anymore. That was removed by 266. We have no protections. So I just will finish with this. I had a Cuban student who was a TA for me. And this student, when he heard about HB7, had tears in his eyes and said to me, I left Cuba only to come to the United States and be told that I cannot speak freely in the classroom. Okay? So this is the gravity of what is happening. And this will have major consequences as the K-12 system destruction will have major consequences for Florida.
Your last word.
One of the consequences of this may be that national accrediting agencies, which review the University of South Florida and all universities across the country, may find Florida in violation of their accrediting standards. They've done this in the past for the University of Florida and Florida State University and the University of South Florida. It goes back to the Johns Commission. That they restricted freedom of speech of professors. They fired professors at will.
You're talking about late 50s, early 60s.
Yeah. And these universities essentially were put on probation. And it's very embarrassing. Here you have the University of Florida reaching a very high standard right now compared to other state universities, and this has the opportunity to reverse all of that in one moment because of this crazy policy on the part of the legislature to prevent freedom of speech.